Welcome to the Jali podcast. I'm your host, Melyssa Barrett. This podcast is for those who are interested in the conversation around diversity, inclusion, and equity. Each week, I'll be interviewing a guest who has something special to share or is actively part of building solutions in this space. Let's get started. Caltha Seymour is the National Channel Manager, Industrial Control Division, where she's responsible for developing and executing distribution channel partner sales and marketing strategic initiatives, including programs to cultivate sales growth and increase profitability. She's originally from Canada and has held positions managing new product development, including a role as a cross-functional project leader for Eaton's $1.5 billion commercial vehicle product line. Prior to joining Eaton, Caltha leveraged her leadership skills in operations and consulting positions for institutions of higher education and professional sports, including the National Football League and the United States Military Academy, West Point. She is a former elite track and field athlete, classically trained pianist with French as a second language, and currently serves on the AthLife Foundation Board of Directors and the advisory board of the Fox Foundation. I am so excited to have Caltha Seymour here with me today. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with you today as well.
So I am really interested, and I usually start out asking people a little bit about their background. And I think you have an interesting one because I don't think I have talked to anyone from Canada yet. So I would love for you to talk a little bit about how you got to where you are today and what that journey looks like.
Wow, loaded question right off the bat. I like it.
Right?
I like it. Well, again, I appreciate the perception that you have for my leadership value, for you today. And, my bio, as you mentioned, a lot of different things in there, but I wanted to talk maybe a little bit about who I am before coming to Eaton and working for an American company, to maybe just paint a small portrait, if you will, of, my leadership experience and kind of the record that I have of just the passion I have for I&D that has kind of run through all my experiences and championing and creating lasting impact through I&D innovations is a passion of mine. So, I started as a professional athlete kind of after college. I came to the U.S. for university and experienced so many, great victories. And as you can imagine, very humbling defeats, which really developed a resilience for me, right? And that set me up for success for really everything else I would go on to do. And so it gave me confidence to begin actually one of 3 entrepreneurial ventures, which over the years that taught me to, creating value, delivering results, and, continuously improving all the elements of, the work that I'm doing. And at that time, it was, the business venture. So, I got to learn how to uphold the highest possible moral responsibility, right? Servicing your customers. Then I had an opportunity to teach at West Point and there, preparing cadets at the United States Military Academy. The staff that I had there, we had an opportunity to do for the institution what had never really been done before. And that was to truly diversify, the classes and give the country a generation of leaders possessing very deeply rooted respect for common strength from very different people. So that was kind of the West Point. And then in the mix there was also 6 years of working for the National Football League, right? And even there, my role was an I&D mission to really ensure the life success of people who had been told, they had no choice simply because something about them was different. Recently, I got an MBA about 4 years ago. And, I'm a nerd, so my 3rd degree, and I had a chance to manage a center of excellence and we just came to help women and men break boundaries there, right? There's so many stereotypes that are out there about us, how we look like, what our gender is, and what our beliefs are. And so, it was an opportunity to help move past the status quo, to find excellence unrealized in the people that we get to work with every day. And in doing that, just bringing great value to identities and to do anything you really set your mind to. So it's been fun to see kind of I&D weaves throughout all the roles that I've had that haven't been I&D specific. And now at Eaton, my passion and commitment to I&D has continued through actively recruiting, talent and getting to consistently engage with our IERGs. I actually recently led a live division-wide race and equality panel with one of our divisions. And it's just been fun to continue that to where I am today.
That's awesome. That is awesome. And, from my perspective, of course, I'll call it inclusion and diversity is really everywhere, right? So from when we start talking about integrating it into, everything that you do, I know specifically Eaton has been kind of a great proponent of inclusion and diversity. So maybe we could start off with you telling us a little bit about Eaton first. And then maybe you can talk a little bit about some of the things that you all are doing, certainly aside from the panel and some of the things you're doing that just kind of is embedded in who the culture and the company is.
Yeah, another great question. So Eaton, just as a company, right, our mission is to improve the quality of life and the environment through the use of power management technologies and services. So we provide sustainable solutions that help our customers effectively manage electrical, hydraulic, and mechanical power, and in a safe way and an efficient way, and also very reliably. So we're a large corporation. I like to say Eaton's like the undercover Fortune 500 company you've never heard about, because our revenues were almost $22 billion last year, and we're in over 175 countries with over 90,000 employees. So a very neat company that I had the privilege to get exposed to kind of as I was finishing up my MBA. And, one of the things that was really exciting for me to work for a company like Eaton is the commitment to diverse work experiences and diversity of thought. I was brought into the company through their global leadership development program for MBA graduates. I was one of six from the class of 2018 coming in 16. And it provided an opportunity to work in two different divisions of the company for 1 year, right? And so when you're coming somewhere for 1 year, you're an individual contributor, you're leading without influence, you got to get work done. And I think if it wasn't a culture where diverse experiences and the inclusiveness of working well with the people that you have on your team, it'd probably be hard, right, to have results in a year. And so I even really surprised myself in the couple of years of that program, because I was just overly astonished at how well I&D is woven all through the DNA of the company, right? From the person that's welding some of our products up into our CEO. There's a strong commitment, and that commitment really is around the aspirational goal that Eaton has to be a model of inclusion and diversity in our industry. And, as we aspire to do that, it's from the way we welcome people to the table. We include people by listening to what they have to offer. And we've created an environment where all employees have an opportunity to be their best. And what I love about Eaton is that when I come to work every day, I can be my whole self. I don't have to be somebody else. I don't have to change the way my thought process is. I don't have to hide any interest that maybe I have that I'm worried that may not be accepted. It is a place where you really can bring your whole self to work. So I'm so blessed to work for a company that sees our performance and our standards essential to, our inclusion and diversity commitment.
That's fantastic. I mean, I love that quote. You can really bring your whole self, because I think in a lot of cases, we try to fit in and make sure that, we can be successful. And that success sometimes, kind of causes you to have to do things that maybe you don't feel is as authentic as you would like to be. So, and I know you all are also doing some things with like talent acquisition and some of those things. Are there specific things that you have done or that the company is doing to kind of set the stage in terms of those best practices, things that you have found beneficial?
Yeah, that's, in thinking of how we're involved, right? Like our resources to support, I&D, and how we're committed to having a next generation of employees that will be more diverse. I guess I'd start answering that question by a statistic that I came across last year. And it said that, I think 1960, about 13% of the population was non-white. And now they're saying in the early 2040s, right? So 20 years from now, 50% of the population is going to be non-white. So when we think about that, it's like, how are we preparing for that? And what I've seen is how Eaton has integrated when you talk about talent acquisition. I mentioned, one of the things that I do in my role is I actually have a goal to recruit and help recruit diversified talent, and not only culturally, but experiences, right? I work for a company that's very heavy engineering based. I'm not an engineer, but the company saw the different experiences I had with different organizations as value add. And so I've made a commitment to help in recruiting every year. And I'm not an HR person. And sometimes people think I am the HR person, but because Eaton's done such a great job of weaving the thought of building our next generation, we're always thinking ahead, right? So I'm, as you mentioned in my bio, I'm the national channel manager. I work with our distribution channel partners nationally and in our product line of industrial control, right? Mm-hmm. But in the fall, every year, I will spend 3 or 4 days out on campuses like Georgia Tech and Michigan State and Iowa State and University of Wisconsin-Madison, looking at that next generation, right? That commitment. And, we're a global company, right? So our competitive market consistently is shifting. And that's also going to shift the mix of talent. So we have to hire different people today than we are, right? Like I'm talking about back in the 1960s, but we talk 20 years from now, we need a difference, right? But in doing that, we have to cultivate that within our own employee network as well. So I like that, you feel called to be a part of that because you want to see the company grow and grow in the way of the diversity that we're going to see kind of moving forward. And we do see diverse talent as a competitive edge. So with that, within the company, like many companies are now adopting, are these resource groups, right? So we have resources supporting I&D from our women's group, our military group, our group for Asia. We have a group for Hispanics and Latinos, LGBT. We even have Enable for disabilities. And so it's not so much groups that you can just come and be a part of with the people that maybe look like you or have the same interests as you, but it's bigger than that, right? How do we become allies for each other? How do we become supportive of understanding different cultures so that as we recruit that talent, we will also retain that talent.
Yeah. And retention is a big deal because I think it's, we've had a lot of companies stand up, especially over the last 6 to 8 months, that really want to get involved with acquiring and retaining talent, especially for people of color. I think in many cases, we may be talking African American versus Latin but what's interesting to me is a lot of times we think about talent acquisition coming from external, and yet we have all these people that likely are already working for us that we forget to really look and figure out how do we sponsor them, how do we advocate for them, and how do we bring them up through the company. And I think on one of my previous podcasts, Monique Nelson mentioned kind of this frozen middle where, you have people trying to get up and you have, the executives trying to drive things down, but there's this kind of frozen middle that you have to get past to figure out how to retain folks and how do you deal with some of that within the company. So, for 90,000 employees at Eaton, which is an amazing number of employees, are there specific things that you all do do the ERGs participate in, I would imagine, helping to retain those employees, or are there other best practices you have found?
Yeah, that, when you think about internal, right, acquisition, right, an internal advancement of your employees, I've seen that modeled really well within Eaton. And like what you mentioned about Monique, and I listen to her podcast as well. And in that middle group, that's a group that's really primed to move into different roles, not only from a leadership standpoint, but a company like Eaton, we have different divisions, right? We've got our electrical sector, we have our industrial sector. And on the industrial side, we've got aerospace in our vehicle group. We actually have a filtration system. We even have 85% of the market share in Golf Pride, right? Which are golf grips, right? So within our company, we have a lot of different areas that you can move to. And the company embraces that, right? Somebody might think, well, I'm in the electrical sector. This is where I've worked my entire career. This is where I need to stay. This is where my experience is. But again, Eaton values diversity of experiences, right? So it is valued that after 2 years you've been in a role that you should be considering what are the next things that you'd like to do. Our managers, management, that's an open conversation that is very highly encouraged twice a year. We have a system about evaluation that we work with our managers to talk about our goals. And we have different pillars, of excellence at Eaton, everything from, being a learner, being accountable, having the opportunity to be transparent, efficient, in our work. And how you achieve those is by having different experiences. So it's nice to know that our company, as when you think about moving up or, laterally or wherever you'd like to move, you don't necessarily have to think externally. You can think internally because it is cultivated to get those experiences. And so when we look at the IERGs and how do they play a part of that? And I think because we have these inclusion resource groups and they're not just there as, we're reaching certain numbers, we're trying to reach these, cultural diversity goals or race and ethnicity goals from a hiring standpoint, right? But it's more of, again, diversity of experiences. And when you bring those experiences, you get a lot of different people. So I have found in the 4.5 years that I've been with the company, this continues just to get better, right? Where you feel a lot more supported, not only by knowing that you have groups that you can talk to about different experiences, but we have functional ERGs, right? If you want to learn more about sales and marketing, you want to learn more about operations, you want to hear about what quality is doing, what's the aftermarket opportunity. We have those resource groups as well where you can build those skills. One of my first year supervisor in the company, he worked with a group and piloted a program within Eaton where you can actually as a manager, you could submit a project. Let's say you'd like to have some data analysis around how our customers are experiencing a certain product, right? You can put a team together and they could be anybody from all over the company working together on a project in their spare time, right? And a lot of times you're putting this extra time in, but you have the opportunity to work on something completely out of your regular job scope and get additional experience. I actually participated in 3 of these projects in my first 2 years. And one of the projects I got to work on was for one of our former COOs of the company, who has now gone on and she's gone on to a CEO role. But we have some business practices and processes that we follow, and she wanted that updated. And I was on a team of 4. I was the only native English speaker. I was with somebody from Brazil, Hungary, and India, and the 4 of us worked together. And what was interesting about that experience is that you had to work on different time zones, the language barrier, how different countries are operating. So it just gave you this global experience in an area that you're not familiar with, right? So
Yes.
These are the types of things that Eaton has put in place to allow their internal staff to grow their skills.
That's awesome. I love the fact that functional ERGs, because I think a lot of times we do only think of, the Black, Latinx, differently abled, LGBT resource groups, but we don't actually think about some of those functional components where you can actually build those skills, which is amazing. Let's pause for a moment. We'll be right back. I know you also mentioned that, and I want to say that you had told me that it was kind of after all of the heightened social injustice components that you all created a panel of leadership to speak to your employees. What was that experience like? Because I know in a lot of cases, there were a lot of people just giving space for people to talk about their experiences. But it sounds like you all even did something maybe even a little different.
Yeah, different for sure. It's interesting because, our leadership, our CEO, all our leaders did an outstanding job when that civil unrest was really starting and the racial inequality conversations. And we just have an outstanding leadership team, and they, send us out a great message so we can understand, where do we stand as a company, and how do we continue to support each other, support our customers, support our stakeholders, right? Because that's very, very important to our business. And it was great to have that. A couple colleagues and I, I'm one of our IARG leaders, and there's four of us within my division who came together, and ironically, we're all non-American. So Canadian, Turkey, India, and Zimbabwe. So we got together and we said, we should put something together for just our division, so we could kind of hear from our leaders on how they would like us to have conversations, with our customers, with our colleagues. What's the mission and the vision that we're really putting forward from our division? We know company-wide, we absolutely understand that, because those are the standards of expectation that we've set and the standard of excellence. But what do we want to do as a division? And so, we hosted this panel. I was able to moderate it, and we had the president of our division and a couple of our VPs, a couple of our GMs, director of operations, and people from different backgrounds to talk about their experiences of either, living in the U.S. or coming to the U.S. and their just thought process around what has happened. We got as deep as different people's upbringings and some of the awakening of just what's been happening. And so it was great to have a very transparent and candid conversations with our leaders that told personal stories to offering challenges to us. And, I mentioned that statistic about, by 2040, we've got our population, 50% being non-white. And we know as a company how we're moving towards that, but what are we doing as a division? And it's, we have to go beyond the metrics. And this is where I am challenged as well within the work that I do and the people I get to work with and some of the organizations I volunteer with and some of the boards that I sit on. But how do we go beyond the numbers? Because we can run our data about the women that we have, the LGBT people, folks that, that identify, people that are disabled, people that are, Latino background. We can run the numbers. But we should really be challenging ourselves to dig a little bit deeper, right? Get even more transparent so we know where the gaps are. And this is not just to Eaton, this is really any organization and company, right? If you look at your attrition rates, right? And If you look at everything from your salary bands, are you losing, women in the lower salary bands? Are you losing women in the higher salary bands? There's so much that we can look at, but we have to go a little bit deeper than just our race and gender numbers. And so it's been neat to kind of see through the cultivation of I&D being in the DNA of the people that work at Eaton, that's starting to get better. But our division also said, our president, but he says we can improve. And he says we've made some great gains, but we have a long way to go. And it's nice to know that your division, your company is committed to the I&D mission. It's not just a statement that's on a website, but we're actually doing the things to get there. So it's nice to be involved and to have those open conversations and to know, what are our goals and aspirations moving forward, especially knowing the statistics that we've been talking about over the last year, and how are we going to get there and how do we continue to press on?
Yeah, absolutely. So, just some great things going on at Eaton, which is fantastic because it's a company I will tell you that I hadn't heard of, but I will definitely be looking more towards these days. And I think what's interesting to me is that the backgrounds that you all have, you mentioned that Eaton touches, I think, 175 countries with 90,000 employees. And the global nature of that really, I would imagine, really does allow for lots of diversity of thought and perspectives from all different areas, from, markets to, the different divisions that you're talking about and all of the skill sets. So it's interesting to me when you start talking about kind of your own background. I know you were born and raised in Canada, if I remember correctly, if that's right.
Yes.
And so I know there's also I think in a lot of cases when people see someone, they assume they fit in a particular box. And so my guess is, that when people see you, they may make an assumption that you're American rather than Canadian. And, I'm not sure if you've had any of those types of experiences and, kind of how that has shaped you. Because I think you're fairly well traveled even prior to being at Eaton. You were one of, I think you tended to travel a lot in your youth as well.
Yes, travel. Like, we should just stop the podcast and just talk about traveling. That's where I feel like so many of my experiences have come from. But yes, I do enjoy traveling. I've actually been to 24 countries. So I'm hoping to be at 25 by next year. COVID slowed us down a little bit with the international travel. Yes. But, and I think this is also just my love for travel. My parents traveled this, at a younger age. But I've just always enjoyed it. And I've enjoyed different cultures. And probably because Canada is a country similar to America. I mean, the U.S. is the original melting pot, right? And Canada, very similar. We've had a lot of different cultures that come into Canada. And even my parents, for example, who are originally from Jamaica, and both my mom was educated in England, and then my dad educated in Canada, and they got married there and had my sisters and I. And so we have always grown up in a very kind of multicultural environment. And even in growing up in the suburbs, it was always very mixed there, just, racially. I classically trained on the piano and studied at the Royal Conservatory of Music growing up, and had a lot of different friends from Japan and China and Korea that were part of my, my everyday training at the conservatory. And those became, families and friends and play dates and things like that. So from a young age, I was always just exposed to different cultures and people through, church affiliation, ice skating, swimming, all the different sports that we enjoy. We ski and toboggan. And so, it has really continued to kind of weave in my DNA, that whole D&I thought process, because life has kind of been that way, and traveling and experiencing different cultures. I will say, I have found for people who maybe haven't traveled as much or haven't been able kind of been out of their own bubble or own space, sometimes it's hard to think that, let's just say somebody that's enjoying a certain food, right? It might be like, well, I just know that this culture enjoys the food, and everybody in that culture probably enjoys that food, or an activity. For example, there's not, it's not a large population of Black people that ski, but I love to ski. It's one of my favorite things to do. I've been skiing since I was very young. But sometimes we'll say, oh, I'm surprised that you're skiing because, historically, not a lot of Black people ski. So sometimes it's trying to help people to kind of get outside of the norm of what we think people are supposed to be or do or look like, or what their experiences are supposed, where they should be, right? Yeah. And so I'm always trying to challenge people when we have conversations, or if there's, if it's a learning opportunity. I really truly think that, the concept of inclusion is an ongoing responsibility and privilege. And it shouldn't be something that should be where we take offense, but we look at it as an opportunity to educate. Or sometimes, I've had somebody say to me before, I didn't know there was a lot of Black people in Canada. I'm thinking, there's a lot of Black people everywhere. Right?
Yes,
but
indeed.
Of course, if you haven't been exposed, right, to the different, cultures and the different thought processes. And I think that's what's kind of neat about growing up internationally, because you do have a little bit different perspective, and that's what's cultivated, right, and encouraged, and you're around that. And when you're not around that environment, you know what? You can put yourself in that environment. It's all about learning. I mean, I'm such a nerd, and I think if I wasn't so curious, maybe I wouldn't have traveled to places like Estonia, where people wanted to touch my hair and touch my skin because they've only seen Black people on TV.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
But that was I had an opportunity to be part of a learning and cultural experience. It wasn't offensive to me at all, because I'm in an environment where the people I was with had never seen a live Black person, and that's okay. Make it a learning experience. Make it fun, So I think there's a way for us to I'm a little bit of a disruptor. So, and I find when you disrupt, you get change, right? And you can move forward, into the goals and the initiatives that you want.
Well, and I love that you talk about curiosity, because I talk about that a lot, because I think sometimes when we get older, we grow up and we're not as curious. It's like, I don't care about that. But the more curious we get, the more information we get and the more intentional we can be about what we really want to be in, as we live our life. And whether that shows up in terms of goals for a company or how you manage or, how you're delivering services to customers, all of those things kind of begin to come into play because your experience now becomes different because you're on kind of another level. So I love all these nuggets that you're giving us in terms of not only the ability to be your own self, but really, the creation of some functional ERGs, going beyond the metrics, traveling and kind of utilizing some of those experiences to teach. Because I think a lot of times, especially, when all the civil unrest kind of came to a head, I'll say, there was a lot of people that were just exhausted because, there were people that felt like maybe they were just being awakened for the first time to understand the depths of what some of the things that go on. But now they were looking to, kind of our group, I'll say, to teach them about what the experiences was, which, can be exhausting when you're constantly trying to, deliver and live up to specific standards because, you kind of carry a bit of a burden, I think, based on just the American culture. So it's interesting to have other perspectives because I think it kind of challenges us to, kind of re-energize and really kind of utilize those opportunities to teach others, teachable moments.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. And I think, just I'm a highly solutions oriented person, right? Mm-hmm. And I love that challenge of gaining hearts and minds, right? Around, for me, it's always a critical business system because, that's my work every day. But I think it's also our challenge in the time that we're living in right now. Let's be solution oriented. Let's find ways to continue educating, to continue bringing awareness, and also helping to be open to different perspectives, right? Again, I just think it always comes down to perspective. And when we can really unite and celebrate and acknowledge and accept different perspectives, we're going to be able to reach whatever goals it is that we have, right? Again, it does come down to everybody uniting and having that willingness to do so.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That intentionality is so important. So I think when we, you all have been doing such wonderful things that I just appreciate the fact that you are willing to share some of these. Are you seeing specific impacts in terms of how it's affecting the company as a whole that you could share? Or
yeah, what I really appreciated about this time is that it has opened up the door for more candid conversation, open and honest and transparent conversations. And I think one of the top reasons that we really wanted to host the panel that we did is because we knew we wanted to hear from our own leaders and how they're experiencing, how are they talking to their children about this? How are they, relating to their upbringing and now kind of being, that awakening of, okay, this is a serious issue. This is something we do need to talk about, and we can't not talk about it at work. I have some former colleagues who haven't felt comfortable to have those conversations with their supervisors, and it's been nice to know that we have, at least from our leadership standpoint within our division and our company, right? Our C-suite executives are outstanding, but they have welcomed, they have embraced those conversations, right? And again, it goes back to the very first thing I said I love about this company is that I can bring my whole self to work, right? Mm-hmm. And we have to we have to create that environment. Then people feel comfortable, right? Yeah. That they can be open and honest about what is happening. I think for some people, the reminder of, sometimes you don't want to be reminded every single day that there is a demographic of people that don't think that you're really worth much of anything, right? Or that you don't have value, but everybody has value. but we have to create the culture and cultivate the culture where that value can be exercised, it can be embraced, it can be accepted, but it can also just help with the solution mindset.
Wow, that is phenomenal. I don't even know if I can say anything else. I think we just want to end on that note. So Caltha Seymour, thank you so much for joining me. And I am so excited to have this conversation and looking forward to staying in touch.
Absolutely. My pleasure, Melyssa, and have a great afternoon.
You too. Thanks so much for being here. Thanks for joining me on the Jali podcast. Please subscribe so you won't miss an episode. See you next week.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.